Welcome to Proof Points, a podcast by Latham High-Tech Seeds. Family owned and farm proven for more than 75 years, Latham Seeds is growing strong. Now, here's product manager and host of Proof Points, Steve Sick.
Good morning, everyone. We're here with Andrew Caruth, DSM in North Central Minnesota for Latham High-Tech Seeds. How are you today, Andrew?
I'm doing well. How are you, Steve?
Good. This is our first podcast together. What would you like listeners to know about your area?
This year, we've been pretty dry in my territory, kind of the west central part of the state. Finally caught some rain here in the last 2 weeks, but other than that, it's been pretty minimal across most of my territory. Some has gotten a few on the western side, towards the Dakotas, in Traverse and Big Stone counties, but you get up to Grant County and down through Stevens, Swift, and over east. It's been very dry. A lot of stress, especially in the corn side of things. Shortened plants. Some years, some areas are hardly putting on cobs. So it's just been, it's pretty small, with that kind of thing. But just the sheer stress on some of this, very good productive ground, having some challenges with that.
Right. Does that affect pretty much all the way across the board? As far as maturities from, the earliest side in your area to the fuller season?
Yeah, maturity wise on the corn side didn't seem to make much difference in some of those areas. The biggest thing has been, picking out hybrids that are seeming to be able to handle some of that stress a little more.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the drought guard traded things like that are artesians. You can see the plant has, been able to handle it a little better,
mm-hmm.
and have a little more put into the ear, I would say, versus some of the, more racehorse type hybrids.
Right. Do you have much silage in your area?
Yeah, there's quite a bit. I have some large dairies in my territory. So they have quite a bit of silage that, mainly dual purpose products and stuff they're looking for. But sounding like some of them are going to be starting, chopping end of this week or early next week already, just with some of the drier conditions and, firing up from the bottom.
Right.
Seeing some of that plant matter drying up on the bottom. So.
Right. Yeah, tonnage is definitely going to be down this year. The way it sounds, you're not going to get a whole lot of quality because of ear development, unfortunately.
Yeah, up there. I know they've been, they have set aside acres set up for these, and I'm guessing they'll probably be taking, more of that than normal, just because just the sheer tonnage and the stress plants are just not going to be there.
Right. We take drought and the heat stress out of the equation, kind of what other challenges or opportunities? I'm sure there's some areas that look good too in your territory.
Yeah, I would say one thing that's really been pushing in harder and harder and showing up this year has been corn rootworm pressure in my territory, especially long-term corn on corn. Just seeing the numbers of beetles out in the fields has been crazy. Even throughout now, there's still a lot.
Yes.
So I think the demand for some more underground protection is going to be being looked at, especially in some of these areas that have had some windstorms where we've seen some corn that's fallen over.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like a lot of it's been deterred to corn on corn for a long time. Maybe some rootworm pressure.
Right.
Where we're seeing some of that corn that laid over versus rotated acre.
Yeah, it's always a challenge with rootworm some years, and now obviously you're starting to see more and more pressure for sure. I noticed, out walking some soybean fields too, there's a lot of rootworm beetles in soybean fields this year. Have you noticed a lot of spraying going on?
There was quite a bit of spraying around silk time, just with the sheer amount of beetles in the out there on the silks and stuff.
Right.
At that point, a lot of people would just throw in, if they're going to put an insecticide on, go put a fungicide along with it as well.
Right.
But yeah, there was, I would say, more than I've seen in the past, sprayed with insecticide this year, just to try and control some of these beetles.
Yeah.
And now, fields that were even sprayed, if you go back into corn on corn there, so we're still seeing, a lot of beetles again. So just very heavy pressure building, and I think it's only going to continue as they lay eggs and we just keep hatching.
Right. Yeah. It seems like it's a never-ending cycle anymore. Have you, you mentioned about fungicides. Have you seen, some pretty good advantages in your area with fungicide applications this time of year?
I have, I'd say it's increased popularity around that VT time with for plant health. We don't have a lot of disease pressure up in my territory, so mainly it's for a disease or plant health play on the corn. And it can definitely, I think, in years like this where the plant very much stressing, with that fungicide being able to increase plant health and help respirate that plant maybe a little easier than if it wasn't, I think has been a bigger advantage in what I've seen, and seeing that plant kind of hold itself together a little better too under stress.
Right. No, there's a lot of benefits to adding a fungicide. There's no doubt about that. I think that's one of the most underutilized methods of keeping that plant healthy that we've got out there. That it's definitely advantageous. I don't think you'll probably ever see a year where it doesn't help. And like you mentioned, you brought up a great point. When you have stress corn, it's pretty much as more important now to get a fungicide on there as it is when it's, the highest yielding year, which I don't know when that might be again, but hopefully it's
correct.
Hopefully
Yeah. No, that's what it seems. It's with not having the disease pressure up here. The stress aspect to me seems like the best time. A lot of mindset is they don't want to spend money on the crop when it's stressing, but
right.
Anything that you can help that plant through that period, I think is going to reward you and yield.
Yeah, given the fungicide applications, the drought, heat stress, everything that's going on in your area, kind of what's your region's outlook? Do you think, I know harvest is a little ways away yet, but we're starting to set kernels, we're starting to fill pods. What's your region look like this year?
I think for the most part, the western side of my territory looks like it should have a pretty decent yield, I think. It was warm during pollination, but it seemed like we had pretty good pollination for the most part. There's a little bit of tip back to be expected, but, for the most part, it looks pretty good. There'll be some pockets where it's going to be pretty mediocre, but for the most part, I think it should be an average crop.
Well, that's good anymore to meet average in this type of environment and year we're having for sure. What hybrids and varieties kind of stand out to you this year?
So one product that's been standing out would be LH4527 drought card. Having that drought card trait has just definitely been helping it conserve and utilize the moisture it has had. You could see it pick it out in the plots or a side by side in the field. It's just got a little more plant height, and I would say in some of the really stressed situations, even ear development, where some of those, it was brown silked and pollinating, where very stressed next door in the plot with a different hybrid that doesn't have the drought card on it, was having a hard time even pollinating. So I think that's been one standout to me. And then 5034, the artesian as well, having that, kind of the same kind of concept, being able to conserve some of that moisture in all situations. 4937, the double pro there.
Right.
If we've had good moisture or underneath irrigation, looks fantastic. Really nice girth on those ears. now that we've gotten a little moisture, it should help fill in some test weight and things like that, which that product's known for test weight, and it's excellent dry down too. So those are a few key products that have been, looking really good. There's some newer products on there earlier 90 days. The LA's 4335. It should be a new double pro for us. That looks like it's going to be handling, some of the stress and stuff pretty well too, being a little more widely adaptable hybrid. And then that comes with a Smart Stack Pro version as a 90/40, 44/38. So a couple of exciting new products there as well.
That's always good to blend in your good old standbys along with some brand new products, bring some new blood into the lineup, which is always great. I mean, those are some great hybrids to, for your area and for people to look at. What's the number one factor, in your area with customers for choosing products? I take yield out of the equation. We know yield's always the number one, but what other things do you point out, when you're looking at hybrids with customers? What would they make them want to buy that product?
It kind of depends on, the spot or my territory. Some areas is flat, heavy black ground, Red River Valley type soils. And, so it can be, standability, things like that with some of the wind that we get out here. Being a little more open would be a big one, good stock, good roots. And then, being able to handle maybe even some, wet moisture stress, but be able to handle wet feet just on some of those heavy soils that, might not be, as well drained, things like that.
Right.
Once you get into a little more rolling hills, with some tan soils, with clays, things like that, probably a little more widely adaptable hybrids that can handle different soil types, just because we're running into 3, 4, 5 different soil types across the quarter.
Oh, wow.
So, finding, hybrids that'll, be consistent across that and be widely adaptable on, heavy gumbo on the bottom that can, has water holding capacity that can yield.
Right.
And then, areas that's lighter, tan, tight clays that don't release moisture to, be able to find that. So I'd say widely adaptable hybrids is probably one of the bigger things guys are looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a key. I mean, you can always try and find the rock star in the group, but it's always more difficult trying to find something that's very, very universal and won't get you in trouble is really what you're trying to look for certain.
Yep.
Is there anything else as far as a fall outlook or, things you're excited about coming up for this coming year for the next sales season?
So this year, we talked a lot about corn. We could talk about some soybean stuff.
Right. Okay.
It was very, very tough IDC year in my territory.
Right.
A lot of Minnesota had that, southern Minnesota up through the Minnesota or Red River Valley, prone high pH soils with high soluble salts.
Yep.
So that's been a tough thing for that, and trying to find some soybeans to handle that has been a big outlook and what some people are looking for. Soybeans to handle 7.8 to 8.5 pHs we can get as high as. We have a couple products that are looking pretty dang good, and especially in a lot of these IDC spots that are really gotten burnt up, would be going out and digging roots and things like that, and seeing pretty high counts of soybean cyst nematode eggs as well on the plants. So that's another thing that we're looking out at as we're getting more resistance to some of our other SCN traits, some of the Peking stuff coming into our lineup. I think there'll be a real advantage of that going forward as well. So just because the cyst can mask that same symptom as the IDC, so I think that's been flaring up and making it look a lot worse than what it probably would be normally. in some of those areas. So we have a couple, the big one that is coming in our lineup, be limited supply this year, but going forward would be our 1661. It'd be an E3 product. Has looked fantastic in the plots this year, especially in some IDC plots.
Right.
To be able to, grow through all those areas, and throughout the year, I never really got stunted or greened up or yellowed up, and having that peaking gene to help with that, some of those cyst pressures that we're getting high with. That's the one I'm really, really excited about going forward. And then we have the 1881, that same E3 product with the Peking gene, and that handled the IDC pretty well as well. Yellowed up some to begin with, but it had very nice recovery getting into July. So we were able to recover, and that plant's growing now and have potting and flowering and things like that. So looking for those products to being able to grow through those areas and get some yield out of it. Some of those we're not expecting, the same yield across the whole field, but to have something in those areas is kind of the goal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not a cure-all to end-all type products, but no, they're both those products you mentioned are excellent products, and I think they're going to make a huge impact, in your region going forward.
Yep, and I know we're, working with the product team and as our needs assessment with our dealers and customers, and it's kind of our main focus is from your side too. I know is the IDC products, salted cooler type gene, soybeans, and ones that we can handle with some of that defense that we have up here.
Yep. Yeah, we're always on the lookout for new things, especially obviously the way things are changing, and diseases like IDC, like you mentioned, are definitely being more and more pronounced. The cysts obviously are changing and getting worse instead of getting better, unfortunately. So it's definitely a lot of challenges out there, but I think we're doing a good job of keeping up with trying to fill the needs in your area and all your surrounding areas too.
One other disease that's kind of been relatively new to my area that keeps showing its face more and more would be sudden death syndrome.
Okay.
And then the last about week, starting to see some of that showing up. Even with some of the stresses and drier weather and stuff we've had, is still starting to see some show up in soybeans. Was actually out in the soybean field yesterday with a customer looking at some beans, and they were treated with Saltro. And this is underneath irrigation, and it's had pretty high pressure. The last time it had soybeans on it 2 years ago. And he had a check strip out there. And so we're showing a little bit of symptomology with the Saltro treated beans, but where it was non-treated, they're already turning brown, So the Saltro is definitely doing what it's supposed to be doing for, helping control that sudden death. And so that's definitely one thing we're definitely looking at is more Saltro treated beans for help with that, and then obviously finding the best hybrids to have the best tolerance to it as well.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, that's one of the drawbacks to our changing climate is, unfortunately, our friends to the south are sending more and more of these wonderful diseases north, and that never used to be able to survive up here, never existed. So it's unfortunate, but I think you're doing a great job, and I think you did a good job of explaining, use the Saltro, varietal selection is a key to managing SDS.
Yep. So, but yeah, that's on the soybean side, be probably some of the bigger things that we're dealing with up here this year.
Well, thank you, Andrew. And with that, we thank everybody for tuning into this week's episode of Proof Points. Have a good week and stay safe, everybody.